Yeah, I think I'll just touch on property. Obviously, we've seen the FX rate, so both against the pound against the euro and the pound against the dollar have depreciated quite significantly over the last, I say, 12 hours or so. And what does this mean for us, and what does this mean for foreigners? I mean, if we look at it superficially, it means foreign investors can come and buy in London for a lot cheaper than they would have been able to 12 hours ago. So you could talk about investors that are just looking for a yield play, who come to London to invest as a safe haven, and they invest for 2-3 years, and then they lock out, and then they take their money, and then they're happy days. So for them to be able to do that now, it will be a lot cheaper for them than it would have been 12 hours ago. And then another thing we can take from the action of the Leave camp, I guess, for the 17 million people that we've had that voted for us to leave the EU, is the Bank of England have to take action now. Rates are Bank of England base rate now is 0.5. It's been like that since March 2009, if I'm correct. They're probably going to have to bring it down a little bit lower. Maybe there's talk of that having to go to zero. What does that mean for mortgage rates? Mortgage rates are obviously going to suppress, and we're going to have problems from that perspective. So there's obviously an imbalance. We already know there's an imbalance in the property market. We're not producing enough homes to compete with the already increasing demand that we're seeing from domestic, but then also foreign investors. And the problem looks like it's just going to get worse before it gets any better. So, in my opinion, I believe that house prices are going to continue to rise for the foreseeable future, especially within prime locations such as central London.
Obviously, we're talking about David Cameron. We've seen the Brexit, we've seen what he's done. Unfortunately, he's had to resign. There was a lot of pressure on him, not only from his own party, but from the UK public. As Josh mentioned, 7.5 million people voted to leave the EU, and that's a mandate for David Cameron to leave, right? So we're now in kind of a conundrum. The leader, or the Prime Minister we've had since 2010, has left. The leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, is under threat from his own party. They want to get rid of him. Scotland, they want to leave the Britain as we know it. Nicola Sturgeon has already announced that there's likely going to be a second referendum if we do see the Britain leave the EU. Northern Ireland are already kind of vexing matters, saying that they don't want to see themselves putting up across the border with the Republic of Ireland, and they want to see a unified Ireland in total going forward. And obviously Wales as well. Wales themselves, they voted to leave. So Wales and England voted to leave. So it kind of puts in a conundrum. How is the future of Britain going to look? So we've got interesting kind of times at the moment, particularly Britain. Also going outside of that. So Britain, kind of known as the 5th largest economy in the world, has chosen to leave the EU. So where does that leave France, the Netherlands and Germany? Because there's a lot of people in Germany, a lot of people in France and other countries in the EU that don't like the EU system. They don't like how it's set up, they don't like the institutions. And they might see Britain leaving as an incentive to push forward and also stake their own referendums. We may see the Netherlands leaving sometime soon. We may also see France. Obviously, France is a particular strong issue at the moment. Obviously, you might have heard of Front National, or in English, National Front. Marine Le Pen runs that party, and there's actually a strong kind of push against immigration, against any kind of non-secular form that doesn't kind of go with normal French culture. So, if you guys know what a burqa is, you're not allowed to wear the burqa in France. So the burqa is a female Muslim veil that a lot of women wear. That's actually banned in France just because of how the culture is there. So we're seeing a lot of people in different countries across Europe fighting against the main kind of establishment and trying to break away from that. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes, and also seeing how the internal politics in the UK kind of forms and goes forward. So I'm just going to pass on to Andy, who's going to talk about a bit more of the internal power struggle from the Conservative Party.
Now, the advent of Brexit has kind of brought a very interesting dynamic to British politics. A couple of years ago, you'd have probably thought that George Osborne would have been next in line to be Prime Minister. But after David Cameron nailed his flag to the mast of Remain, and unfortunately he's actually lost our argument, we've actually seen the rise of Boris Johnson. It's very interesting how the media have actually, packaged this whole story, because now it's definitely become about Boris Johnson himself. I'm not sure if you watched the news, but a lot of the coverage after the Leave vote was announced was actually outside Boris Johnson's house. So that gives us a very clear indication of what the media expect to happen. On a somewhat more peripheral level, Boris has actually been preparing for this moment for quite a long time in a very, very quiet manner. He's basically positioned himself in a position where he was able to capitalise on David Cameron losing the vote. Now, they have always had a very, very interesting relationship with each other, considering they went to school together, they went to university together. So those are two people that know each other very, very well. And it was very interesting to see Boris decide that he was going to go against the Prime Minister at the very last minute. And that kind of created a totally new narrative for the referendum. It's very interesting how it went from immigration or economics to very much a personality contest between, you could say, two of the biggest political heavyweights in the Conservative Party. And it just happens that Boris played his cards right. He chose the right side. It was a narrow vote, but he's managed to win it. And it looks a very, very clever decision from the former Mayor of London. It's interesting because obviously he has experience of leadership. He has led London. He led London for 8 years, from 2008 to this year. So you could say London has been a bit of an internship for him. And it'll be very interesting to see if he does end up being Prime Minister, if he does get the backing from the 1922 committee, the Conservative Party, and the rest of the parliamentary party. It'll be very interesting to see how he approaches a premiership, really. In my personal opinion, I'm not very sure how it would be, because he's quite ideologically driven, and the way that London has actually progressed over the past few years with Boris defining what we consider to be affordable housing at 80% of market rate. I don't know if that's going to work in Liverpool, but it'll be interesting to see. It does look like that's going to be who the next Prime Minister is, and I guess we just have to keep our eyes peeled and see what happens, really.
Alright, so obviously I'm going to talk about markets. I tend to be the one that does that, although we all share that responsibility. I think the first thing to talk about is Brexit. Obviously it was a big thing. The experts completely missed what was going on. If you look at probabilities implied in whatever, in the volatility in currencies, in rates, which was priced in equities, wasn't priced in whatsoever. And as soon as midnight came and that poll of polls came out and said it wasn't where it was going to go to the Leave camp, you just see a complete flooding and just a dump of sterling, right? And in the morning at 4:30 a.m, when it was pretty certain that the vote was going to be in the Leave camp, you have a dive towards 134 or 5, which is the 1980s. It's not been this low since 1985, and it was worse than what we had in Black Wednesday. But going forward, if you look, markets seem to have stabilised themselves. So it would suggest to me there's been what we call polarity point. So there's kind of the stabilisation point, but it's a level to watch. So the 140 or whatever level it's at now, sterling, and rates, whether they're back up to now, you've got to watch these rates, because this is going to be the level that if something happens again, and it will, probably from Greece, from Spain, from some peripheral European country, or some issue in the US, some debt ceiling that comes along the way, these asset prices are going to hit either these yields or these prices, and then bam, you're going to get the floor. An example of that, before I end and pass on, if you look at 7-7 bombings, there was a quick crash in FTSE, in sterling, and all these things, but it quickly bounced up to what I said is polarity level. This level where there's either a support level, where stocks either go down to a resistance level, there's this kind of clearing level. And when there was the crash in 2007-8, what was the signal that there was the crash? Well, markets kept on touching this polarity level, and then as soon as all hell broke loose, bang. So watch out for the polarity levels, because something is going to come again. This story is just continuing.
Alright, so this was a short but sweet video clip of Capital Moments, us touching on the Brexit and how it's affected the UK economy. To find out more, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or SoundCloud. chest.